If somebody had 2 weeks of weight loss and they told me I just started lifting weights, then I might start asking questions like, looking at your body, can you see a difference? Can you see any sort of change? And because when you're losing weight, but you're putting on muscle, depending on how much fat you have on your body, that's the X factor.
If we were already struggling with getting enough protein or getting enough calories, like even when we start, we really got to be on top of that, even more so in general, correct? Is there anything that we could eat or that would mess up, ruin the benefit of that fast? But like, is there anything that can ruin it, really?
I just felt like it's been really low, and I fasted for 3 days this week in order to get my 4 pounds, and that I lost. That I still I weighed myself twice this morning, and I took the lowest one. Okay.
Totally, yeah. And yeah, and this is great. This is great. So now getting into the nuance. So you need to, and if you need some one-on-one help, if you're in the Warrior program, which I think you are, we can go on a one-on-one call. But basically, you're looking at your trends, and you should be calculating percentages, right? What percentage of my total weight did I lose? 1 to 1.5% is a good range, right? As that, it's okay if that starts to decrease. It's not okay if it decreases near zero, or if it gets really low, right? Close to zero, at zero, anything like that's when we start saying there's a problem. But if you're losing at 1.5% and then now you're losing at 0.9, but you're staying steady at 0.9, I wouldn't change anything other than maybe being a little bit more aggressive with your fasting. That's okay. But if you're increasing your fasting window and you're doing it every single week and it continues to drop, that's when, okay, we're trending in the wrong direction. And rather than wait for it to get to 0.25 or zero, and you're seeing the trend down, we could fix it now. And I would rather you fix it now, focusing on maybe a mini reset, taking a week or 2 off of fasting, maybe going really keto, really trying to push the calories up, really focus on more volume for the weight training. Because if you take a week or 2 off of long fasting and you get your calories up a little bit more, now you have extra calories that if you go turn around and really spend more time in the weightlifting, you might put on a pound of muscle or 2, which would be a phenomenal thing, a good shock to the system. And
how do we know if we're gaining muscle rather than fat? Because I started doing the weights, and I did do weights when I was younger, and my understanding is that there's like muscle memory, but it has been a long time. I've had 2 kids and everything. So
there is, if you've lifted for a decent amount of time in the past and then you get back into it, your body will get back to it faster than the first time you ever started. But it's a great question. And going back to how do you know, it's tough because there isn't any good, reliable, cheap, easy to do method of checking body composition. If there was, I'd be all over it for you guys. A DEXA scan, you guys should Google in your area. If you could find a DEXA scan area, it's still not like we have one here, just happen to have one near me for $80. I've done hydrostatic weighing before. They used to have a company here that was close. They're gone, but I looked up a DEXA scan and I found this company near me. It was $80. I still had to make an appointment. I still had to go there, but it was cool. It was cool to do that and see that. There's no national DEXA scan everywhere company, or else I'd let you guys know, but it'd be a nice thing to do to Google in your area and see if there's a DEXA scan company or a hydrostatic. Those would be the most accurate. So if you have access to one, you can afford it, it'd be great to do. Insulin resistance, to get fully optimized, to become really insulin sensitive, that could take a year. It really can take up to a year. I think that we move really fast in this protocol because who else is freaking fasting for 48 hours? No one's advocating that. I don't have studies I can only guess, but from what I see with patients and how their body responds to carbs, somewhere between 4 to 6, 9, and maybe 12, if somebody's really metabolically broken, to become very insulin sensitive. And one of the ways that you know you are very insulin sensitive, which when you're very insulin sensitive, you will be metabolically fit as well. That means your body can tolerate carbs. You can go have a day of things that are high glycemic. that would spike your sugar up, and your body handles it just the way that it did when you were younger, right? You don't go into necessarily aggressive fat storage mode so quickly when you're insulin sensitive. That's why this is so important to me and to you guys, that we become the highest level of metabolic health that we can, because then our ability to tolerate life's junk food and life's, various things that raise our blood sugar, it's going to make sustaining our weight loss so much easier in the future.
When we're starting to work out, we're starting to do these resistance training, we need to be even more conscious about what we're eating, like making sure we're eating enough, even more.
Yeah. So we have to be conscious about what we're eating in general, right? Regardless of weightlifting. But the macronutrient that becomes even more important when you're weight training is protein, right? Like that's the thing. So if you are not getting adequate protein, even when you're not weight training, that's a stimulus towards your body to not protect your muscle mass as much, because even just consuming protein stimulates this mTOR pathway, which is a signal towards growth, which a growth signal, if you're in a caloric deficit, translates to protect my muscles. That's what that means, right? So the sweet spot, though, to really get the benefit is you got to have both. You got to have the stimulus of the weight training, and then you got to have the adequate protein to feed the muscles. That signal has the nutrients to work with, if that makes sense. So you got to be conscious about what you're eating in general for all those reasons, but you got to be more conscious about protein when you are weight training. It's definitely a biggie.
Yeah, so protein's like our main concern no matter what. But if we were already struggling with getting enough protein or getting enough calories, even when we start, we really got to be on top of that, even more so in general, correct?
Yeah, it's not, I don't want to say that if you're still bad on your calories and protein that you shouldn't weight train. I don't want to say that. And that's why
right. No, but that we need to be on point at our baseline, and maybe even having a little bit more protein or a little bit more calories because we're adding our resistance training in.
Yes. I would rather you overshoot your protein, especially when you're weight training. Absolutely. In other words, to maximize the benefit that the effort and time that you put into weight training, to maximize that, get your protein in, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean don't stop, that it has to be this perfect equation for it to work. No, but you're going to put in the time. And so adequate protein is going to help.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, what is there something special that we should be eating before, or we should be eating after, but still prioritize our protein? I know that you talk about you do your heavy lifting on the weekends, and that's when you eat more carbs. So on a carb day, or like you always say, holidays, special events, when you're going to know you're going to eat more, those are good days to weight train, because you want. So I guess that answers that question. And then I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much time.
Oh, you're good.
As far as fasting, when we do our long fast, is there anything that when we come out of that fast, is there anything that we could eat or that would mess it up, ruin the benefit of that fast? I guess maybe I'm answering my own question. I know you say that it does so many calories, and if you had this one thing, it's not compared to that. But is there anything that can ruin it, really?
Great question. So after the fast, not really. During the fast, yes. So let me get into that, because you can appreciate both. So after the fast, you've already gotten the benefit, right? All the massive calorie deficit. So you burned a lot of, you lost weight, you trained your body to become more metabolically fit. You got the stressor. Now your body's responding to the stressor, right? If you go stuff your face, it's no different than stuffing your face any other time of the week. There's an impact of stuff in your face, but to undo the benefit of the fast, you'd have to go consume 4,000 calories. It's pretty hard to do that.
Yeah.
This is not weird, but there is a thing to think about. If you fast for a really long time and then you go have insanely high amount of carbs, which you guys shouldn't be doing that anyways. But if you did do that, you could feel like crap and create an electrolyte imbalance. That's a little bit of just a concern in general. You'd have to really you do a long fast, and then you dive into a super glycemic, super high carby meal, then you might have a shift in your electrolytes and you could feel like just completely floored.
So I'm just finishing my third week and I wrote this in the thing to go over today, but I've done pretty well with this strictly keto. After the 3 weeks, I know you said that maybe start implementing or bringing back into some carbs. So I was wondering like how much, how many carbs, et cetera, and which ones you recommend.
Totally. So after 3 weeks, but I'm glad you're bringing this up. So to clarify, the timing I like people to try for the reintroduction of carbs is usually 2 months.
Oh,
so 2
that's
months.
Fine.
Yep. And it's going to be different person to person, right? Just like the 4 to 8 hours, sort of like an arbitrary guess that works for most people. 2 months, same thing. You might need longer. You may get away with less, but we got to draw the line somewhere. So I'd wait 2 months. And then what I want to see before we do that is that everything is stable, right? And this is me see, or what I'd like you to see, whoever's making the call here. What I want in place, I should say, is that weight loss is smooth. You're losing weight within that 1 to 1.5% range. Everything else is going good. You got your weight training in. That's a biggie. If all that's going good, then yes, we can start to reintroduce carbs. So what does that look like? I think it definitely depends on how low carb you were, right? So you definitely want to make an increase relative to where you came from. So if you were hardcore keto and you really were getting less than 10 grams of net carbs a day, let's just say hypothetically, then I would definitely take a couple weeks and just make a slow increase. So 10 a day, maybe 30 a day, and do that for a week or two, right? You definitely want to increase relative to what you were at. Now, once you get 30, because 30 to 50 grams a day of net carbs is still really low. That is still, it's not keto anymore, but it's still considered low carb. Once you get to that low carb range, the next increase, this is going to be preference. If you would rather have low, medium carbs every day, go for it. I always talk about carb cycling. I'm a big fan of carb cycling. And we can have a whole separate discussion about whether carb cycling might actually be more beneficial. That's controversial. There's mixed informations. But even if carb cycling doesn't in of itself give, the reason why I'm a fan of it is because it's one method of taking your weekly carbohydrate intake and lowering it. And that's why I like it. As opposed to having a medium amount of carbs every day, I personally, just for the sake of social and the pleasure of being able to have a higher carb day, that aspect of it is nice. If I have some keto days and then I have some carb days. So that's one aspect of carb cycling, but it gets better. We know for a fact, and you guys have heard me talk about this when we talk about holidays and damage control, the days that you lift heavy weights, like really get at it, not a circuit, but resistance training, there's some particular physiological changes that happen. Specific receptors called GLUT4 receptors get translocated on the receptor of the cells, which basically is just what that means is your muscles will absorb glucose. They're always absorbing glucose till they're full, but they're going to absorb glucose even more the days that you lift weights. So you have this indirect mechanism. You have this direct mechanism of your muscles wanting to utilize the glucose that you consume that day, the extra carbohydrates. And so by your muscles being more directly and more active grabbing the glucose, guess what? You indirectly protect the fat from being a potential vesicle that ends up storing that excess glucose. We're asking about alternative day fasting. Can you elaborate on, there's a lot of different versions of ADF. So which one are you asking about?
The alternative day.
I know, but there's a lot of versions of that. So are you talking about 24-hour fast? So for example, a Monday you eat and then Monday evening you stop and then you wait till Tuesday evening and then you eat Wednesday and then you
So
fast.
I just do sun up to sundown. So, and then I eat the next day. So if I start Monday, I've stopped Sunday. So then when the sun's up Monday, I eat and then I stop sundown. I don't know, it goes down to 8 where I live, but I try to stop eating a little earlier. And then the next day, I'm fasting into the next day until Wednesday, sun up. So just like every other day.
Totally. So that's a lot of fasting. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you have that 12-hour period where you're eating. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you have 48 hours over 2 days You have 12 hours that
Mhm.
you're eating and you're fasting for the other 36 hours. And then you're repeating that every 2 days. That's what you're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so this is a lot of fasting.
Well, wait a minute.
Phenomenal.
Hold on. Let me make sure I'm communicating it right. So let's start with Monday. So Monday, I'm fasting all day. When I go to sleep Sunday night, I had probably eaten like all Sunday. So the
Yep.
next day, I'm fasting Monday. And then Tuesday morning, I'm eating.
Correct. So that's what
Yeah.
we're talking about the same
Mhm.
thing. Every
Okay.
48-hour cycle, you are
Mhm.
eating for a 12-hour window. That's what you're doing.
Okay.
So from what you're saying, and that's probably too much fasting. It's phenomenal healing. But what's
Mhm.
the only problem with too much fasting is the same thing as too much calorie restriction per week. That's what that comes down to. This is
Okay.
why I don't want you guys fasting for 3 days a week, every single week. You're going to plateau. I think that if you've already been doing that and the weight's coming off and you're feeling really good, I would slowly start to increase your eating window. The gold standard here is 1 48-hour fast. And then I want you
Mhm.
eating on the other 5 days.
Oh.
So you're doing great. Just let's take one of those 36s, push it to
Mhm.
48, and then not do it again till the whole next week.